Amen.
All the info. All right, well, we are Luke chapter 22 tonight.
Woohoo.
So turn in your Bibles there, and we're going to actually pick it up in verse 55. It's a long chapter. There's a lot of verses.
There's a lot that happens in this chapter.
Yeah.
And just as a recap, if you'll remember back earlier in the chapter, in verse 31, Jesus says, Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift you as wheat, but I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. And Simon Peter replies, Lord, I am ready to go with you to prison or to death. And Jesus answered, I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny 3 times that you know me. And so that's helpful context as to what's going on here. So now I will pick up again in verse 55, unless you had more to say on that.
No, I think that was perfect.
All right,
lead us
pick
in.
up again in verse 55 of chapter 22. But when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. A servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, This man was with him. But he denied it. Woman, I don't know him, he said. A little later, someone else saw him and said, You also are one of them. Man, I am not, Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted, Certainly, this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean. Peter replied, Man, I don't know what you're talking about. Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him. Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly.
Wow. So as we've been saying, Luke really gives the briefest account of all of these things. So we're going to be pulling some information from Matthew and from Mark and from John.
I'll put in the parallel passages.
Would you please?
Yeah.
That would be great. Yeah, Matthew 26, Mark 14, John 18. Give us a little bit more of a rounded out picture. And it's like normal when people tell you stories about the same stuff, different people will include different aspects.
They have a different perspective, and they may also have different goals in telling you the story.
Exactly. So that's kind of what we're seeing here. So because Luke does it so quickly, it almost kind of sounds like, wow, this happened like pretty quickly going on. But it actually took quite a few hours for all of this to happen.
Yeah.
So thanks for reminding us of where we are here. Peter has total confidence in himself that he can handle Satan, that he can not deny his beloved rabbi, his master, his
He's
savior.
already cut a
his
guy's
Lord.
ears off for him.
Yeah, that's right.
Tonight.
That's right. So last night we were kind of talking, if you missed it, maybe you want to go back and just watch the end of last night or the whole thing. It was really great. That this courtyard would have been the courtyard of the high priest family. So Annas would have been like the godfather, and he had
In
been
all the ways.
He had been high priest, but now he wasn't high priest anymore because Rome said done. By the way, I found out today why Rome pulled the plug on Annas.
Oh, we know why? What did he do?
Yes, I had no idea why, but I stumbled across it when I was
so
researching
exciting.
something else. Apparently, and this really plays into the story, so it's really cool. There was a time, I think it was 15 AD, so 15 or so, 18 years before this, that Annas led kind of an uprising, and the Jews took matters into their own hands and went ahead as a judicial body and executed when they were not supposed to do that.
They were not allowed to inflict capital punishment. No. The Romans had taken that away from them.
Only Rome could capital punish you.
Only Rome could kill you.
Right. Now we have in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, Stephen is stoned, but that was by a mob.
Yeah.
That was not by a court. This was by a court.
So interesting. And so what he was trying to do was usurp Rome's authority and take back that power into their own.
Exactly. This is, like I said, about 18 years before where we are in the New Testament right now. Can you not, even in that, see the sovereignty of God?
So we know Annas has no issue killing people.
That's right.
Okay.
He'll take them
Good
out.
to know.
He will take them out. So,
like I said, the Godfather, in so many ways.
Yes, and so
really freaky.
Terrible, terrible, terrible man. So he has been deposed, but he was able to keep it in the fam because he likes the money so much. So his son-in-law, Caiaphas, is now the high priest that Rome has appointed because Annas is out. Caiaphas is it. And they have their little compound, not little, this enormous
6,500 square feet worth of compound.
Yeah. Right kind of next to the Temple Mount with a
They've
little
got their own like
bridge.
Freeway over to it. It's really quite a
Yeah,
nice
we
setup.
called it a viaduct because that's what it's called. And some of you were like, well, does it carry water? And I kind of had the same thing. I'm thinking of aqueduct in that moment.
Yeah.
This is a viaduct, so it's a little bit different. So
Think
no
of
water.
the word via, meaning to go through or across something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're going via the viaduct, and
Yeah,
that's
there you
what's
go.
going on.
So it's just a little bridge across. If you were confused, like, are they swimming through the viaduct? No, they're
What a commute to work.
That would be amazing. If they could have pulled it off, they probably would have. So in this courtyard, then it kind of goes off into the various houses. It's palatial. It's ritzy for this day. I mean, if you saw the picture I posted earlier of the bathtub, I said, not really spa-like to me. It looks pretty crunchy there and cement or whatever they were bathing in. It didn't look very comfortable, but that was a big deal in those days. So there would have been, off of this courtyard, a very narrow, long corridor that went out to the street. We said this last night. And at the street, there would have been some kind of really secure gate. So secure was the gate that they would put a girl to guard it. So we know that nobody was coming through that wasn't supposed to. So this is where Peter and John come through this narrow gate. John gets them in somehow. One of you asked last night, who did John know that he got them both in?
We don't know.
I said, I wish I knew. I'm with you on that. I don't know. I wish I did. I wish I could figure that out, but there's no way to know. We're not told. So they come through this. So I want you to picture yourself. So you're there. So you're walking through this narrow, it's got really big stone walls that go up, and you go through this narrow corridor, and then in the center is this huge open courtyard, and there are people everywhere. Now, this is the middle of the night. There should not be people milling around everywhere in the middle of the night on a normal basis, but this is not a normal night.
Yeah.
So they have already taken Jesus into the house of Annas, who technically has no jurisdiction, but he's running the scene. So we'll come back to that. So we have like two plots going on at the same time. It's like one of those movies where it's back and forth, back and forth. I always get confused and it's like, what are we doing right now?
That's why I don't watch movies.
Yeah, so the movie of Jesus is running over here, but we're going to actually focus on the movie of Peter over there. So we're told that Peter sits down amongst all these people milling around and sitting. It's cold, it's April, and it's in the mountains in a dry desert climate. So it's about 50-ish. So it's chilly. It's really chilly.
They've got a nice fire going though.
They do. And so Peter decides he will kind of scooch in towards the fire, warm himself up. My question to you, and I want to hear from you right now, is why do you think Peter went there? Now we don't know what's going on with John because he really just doesn't include himself in the description that I can find anyway. I haven't exhaustively looked, so maybe I just missed it, but at least in this account we don't see John in here. But all the other disciples,
They're gone. They scattered.
They took off. They are out of there, and
They're not getting close to Jesus right now. Yeah. Peter's pretty darn close. I mean, he is right on the outskirt of where all the action is happening. I'm sure he can hear it. You know, there's people talking, there's whispers, there's all these people here. So he's like positioned himself very much in the middle of it.
There's probably screaming going on from the religious leaders as they are screaming at Jesus.
So why is he there? Loretta says he wants to follow Jesus, but at a distance.
I think that's perfectly valid. It's a great point.
Yeah, he's got a little back and forth going on, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Roberta says he wants to see what happens to Jesus. He's curious. He wants to know what goes on next. I think Margie says something interesting. Peter said he'd face risk for Jesus, and so he did, to an extent. Emily said he didn't want to be associated with the trouble.
I like that.
I think that's really insightful. Yeah, I think that's all correct. Kimberly says he's trying to prove his loyalty and that he wouldn't deny him. Mary says he's worried about Jesus.
I think all of those.
Yeah.
Zara, he was conflicted.
Zara sums it up. Yeah,
I think
he was
that's really
conflicted.
good.
I think he was very conflicted. Yeah, because as Susie says, he's concerned about his friend, his rabbi Jesus. He wants to stay close, and at the same time, as some of you pointed out, he's fearful. He's willing to take risks up to an extent, and so he's sort of snuck in there. He's not like right up where Jesus is, right? And so he's kind of probably sitting there trying to be like, okay, they're going to take him, they're going to kill him. What am I going to do? You know, how am I going to approach this situation? What's my response going to be? And probably like sitting there trying to take a moment to figure out what the next step is.
He very well may have. By the way, this is all conjecture because we're not really told.
Yeah.
There's no way to get in his mind historically unless they tell us. So it's all a guess. You know, I was kind of thinking for myself, have you ever had a situation that took you by surprise and was so horrific that you just literally did not know what to do with yourself? Like, you would go somewhere and then you didn't want to be there, but there was nowhere else you wanted to go, but you went anyway and somewhere else, and that was no good, and you couldn't cry, you couldn't talk, you just couldn't do anything. Like the worst of worst situations that your mind is blowing up, you don't know what's going to happen, you're scared, you're worried, you're hurt as what's happening. Deb said he would die.
But yeah, Jesus said he would die, but now maybe he's not so sure.
Yeah.
Lauren says, it's so horrible,
I
you
like
can't
that, Lauren.
help but stay and watch.
Yeah, I think Lauren just really summed it up, like a horrible wreck. Yeah, like you don't want to look, but you do anyway. So I think there's all those things are going on right now. What the predominant one is, I'm not totally sure, but we know he is a mess right now. He's beside himself and does not know what to do. Then it says he is identified by a servant girl. Mm-hmm. And when it says that she looks at him intently,
yeah,
it's a really strong word in the Greek. I mean, she doesn't just like, hey, is that
She's
you?
very closely examining him, probably trying to get closer to him. Yeah.
Oh yeah, she looks him up and down. And here's the thing, she's a servant girl. So she doesn't carry any real power. She doesn't carry any real clout. She's not treated nicely by, those that she serves. But all of a sudden, this servant girl has some pretty juicy tidbits of info on what's happening that nobody else has picked up on. So I think what she's doing in her mind, and again, I'm just guessing, maybe I'm wrong, is I think she was like, I know something. I know something about what's going on here that's kind of valuable.
Very relevant.
If they got that guy in there and they're going to take him out, it seems to me that they would want to also take out this guy who's his best buddy. And so she looks at Peter. Oh, by the way, I forgot to say this too. We know from one of the other Gospels, she's the one who let him in the gate.
She was the girl who was guarding it.
Yes.
So she saw him and John come in. Now she's seeing him here. She's like, huh, 2 and 2 together.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm going to posture now in order to make myself valuable. I'm going to let the world know of this information. And so
what does she say?
She says, this man was with him. And then Peter responds, woman, I don't know him.
Yeah, and he was probably very adamant about it.
Yeah.
We do not know her name, Lauren. That's a great question. She's never named. No.
Sad.
Yeah. So we are told in Mark, if you remember last night, Mark tells us that Jesus actually said to Peter that the rooster would crow 2 times before, or at the end of 2 times, he would have denied him 3 times. So the other Gospels just don't bother to include that information. Not a big deal. It doesn't mean that they got it wrong. They just didn't include that. So according to Mark, after Jesus is denied by Peter the first time, the rooster does crow. But Peter doesn't seem to hear it, or maybe he doesn't process it or something. I think it kind of goes over his head. Yeah, it is in one of the other Gospels. I'm not giving you every single solitary. We'll never get through this. So Noelle put down, if you're just joining us, a little bit up in the comments. We're down in the comments, whichever way it goes. I guess it's down. I don't know. The parallel gospels like Matthew 26, Mark 14, and John 18, I think is what that is. So you can look at those up on your own. You'll put the whole story together. All right. So after he's denied him once, he gets up, and we're told again in another gospel, he's walking toward the exit now. Whether or not he planned to exit, I don't know, because he doesn't, but he's on his way to the exit. And on the way, some other people start to chime in.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the original servant girl who's not going to let this go and who's kind of getting everybody worked up. And she's telling everybody, I'm telling you, that guy was with him. I'm telling you. And they're like, hey, you know what? Yes, he was. Yes, he was. And they're insisting and they're chiming in. Hey, you're one of them too, to Peter. And Peter says, man, I am not. I do not know what you're talking about. Noelle, what does that mean? Like, man?
It's like, dude.
It really is.
No.
Yeah.
It's a very colloquial way of speaking.
Yeah.
And also just, it's not necessarily referring to it's technically a gendered term, but very much in the way that we use the word dude.
Yeah.
Use it across the board. But yeah, I mean, he's just speaking very colloquially to these people and just, no, I'm not. Come on, dude. No. Yeah, I'm not one of them.
And he denies him again. And obviously Peter is in no way is he processing right now what he's doing in accordance with what Jesus prophesied.
Yeah.
It has not hit his radar at all.
Yeah.
But when you understand what's going on, like he's on total overload here. Have you ever been in that like overdrive where there's stuff going on around you that you're not processing at all, and later you're like, what? A tree blew down while I was like I didn't even hear it because I was dealing with something else. It can happen where you get so focused on something that you don't have the capacity to really think about or notice or see or hear.
So he doesn't have a lot of self-insight at this moment. He hasn't recognized what he's done in accordance with what Jesus said. And so then it says in Luke, about an hour later, another asserted, certainly this fellow is with him, for he is a Galilean. And so what this guy does is he goes, your accent is really unusual. You're from Galilee. And the only other people here from Galilee are the guys who are with Jesus.
Yep.
You're one of them. You're with him.
And we're told that this is a male relative of Malchus. And Malchus was the name of the guy who Peter went an ear whacking and cut it off in the garden. So I'm sure at this moment, Peter's like, I have regrets. That was a bad
the guy accusing him of being with Jesus.
Yeah, he's a relative of the guy whose ear he's
Malchus's
hacked
cousin.
off.
Yeah.
Yeah,
this is unfortunate.
It's a bad moment for Peter. But yeah, he's identified also by his Galilean accent. And we were just talking last night when we were kind of going over this, that it doesn't matter what year you live in, what culture you live in, we all make fun of accents, don't we?
It's also, there are probably
do.
people they're making fun of us right now.
Yeah, and I mean, and not necessarily in a vindictive, terrible way, but
it's just sort of fun seeing the differences in the way people talk.
Yeah, I mean, some of them are really cute, I don't think that they thought the Galilean was really cute.
No.
They used to make fun, like this is the southern part in Judea. Galilee is up in the north. They have the Cockney accent, I guess, and they're more prim and proper down with their British accent down in Judea. Kidding, not Jewish, but kind of gives you the not English.
You're saying the Jews didn't have British accents.
Yeah, I don't know what the accent sounded like. But
it's helpful to know though, because it's a very distinctive accent that they would have had in the northern portion. And so what this guy is saying is, I recognize your accent. You're one of them. The only Galileans we have here today are those who are with Jesus. So what's up? And Peter says...
He loses it.
He really does. He says, man, I don't know what you were talking about. And just as he was speaking, like as the words were exiting his mouth, the rooster crowed.
And we're told in the other Gospels that not only does he vehemently deny, because Luke is pretty succinct here, we're told that he's actually cursing and swearing at this point. So he has ratcheted his denial up to the utmost level. And I always thought that meant he was saying bad words, whatever they were. In studying this, I realized that's not what that means. That to curse in this time would have been to say something to the effect of, may God damn me if I'm lying. So curse would be like the negative side of it.
May God curse me if.
Right. The positive side, the other side of the coin, swearing would have been, I swear to God, I am telling you the truth. May God damn me. May he curse me if I'm lying to you. I swear to God, I'm telling you the truth. So that's how he would, and I don't typically talk like that, by the way, but I had to demo. So there you go. So that's how he's talking here. And so get the picture. Get the picture. Oh my word. As he's doing this, that rooster crows, and it must have jogged him at that moment. He looks up, and we are told in the other Gospels that at that moment, Jesus is walking past him. Yeah. And not only...
Yep, the Lord turned and looked straight at Peter.
There you go. So in Luke, he just mentions that he looks at him. We know this because he's walking. Now, again, I wanted to paint the picture of where he was, because one of the places that Jesus was taken to was the house of Annas. That would have been like off of this courtyard. You know, let's just say it's up here on this spoke, up high, because it says he was in an upper room. They would have brought him down at some point. Now, I don't know, maybe earlier than this, walked him across the courtyard over to Caiaphas's spoke, his part of the compound, and up to Caiaphas's house. And they would have continued to do their horrible, dastardly deeds. And then they would have walked him out of Caiaphas's house and then over that viaduct that we talked about, across the courtyard, and then over to the Great Hall, which is where they were supposed to hold trials. And we'll get to that in a minute. So either on Jesus's way from Annas to Caiaphas, or from Caiaphas to the Great Hall, somewhere in there, that rooster crows, he passes Peter, and he looks directly at his eyes. And what do you think? Okay, I need to hear from you right now, and I hope you can just somehow, some way, almost like put yourself in Peter's shoes right now. What do you think Peter felt at this moment? I mean, what was that moment for him like? Do you think he got it? And
how did he feel about that? I mean, just hours before, he's just so vehement that he is ready to go with Jesus to prison or to death. And here he is doing exactly what he said he wouldn't. Robin says he got caught red-handed, and that's when his guilt kicked in, and he realized it was not good. Emily said unbearable shame. And
Agreed.
Emily, I really like that you brought that up, because it is a shame-honor system. It is a shame and honor culture, and so that's exactly what he would have been feeling. Lauren says there's no way to even describe that feeling, but the blood had to have just drained from his face. Yeah, and you can just see he just goes white. I can just imagine it. Mary says devastation. Kimberly, total devastation. Susie, total despair. Loretta, horrible remorse. Yeah,
that's a good word.
I think that's great. Devastated. Tammy says so disappointed and ashamed. Yeah, all of that. Roberta, he's saying, what have I done? I feel horrible. Karen says he feels like a failure. Yeah, I think failure is actually not a word that I thought of, but yeah, I'm sure that's exactly how he felt. Just, I'd promised to be with him to the end, and here I am, having done exactly what I said I was never going to do.
Well, and just remember too, I mean, we just don't even have a grid to really put this through, because we've never had a friend or a teacher like Jesus in the flesh. This is his rabbi. This is the one that chose him. That's unusual. That didn't happen. The student would try to get the rabbi to let them in. Jesus said, I want you, fisherman. I want you, uneducated, foot in the mouth guy. And he was one of Jesus' closest, like the closest friend Jesus had. It was Peter, James, and John, and Peter's always listed first in that, and then it goes on to the other disciples from there. This is his rabbi that has never harmed him, has never spoken anything out of line to him, has never disappointed him, like from a human perspective. Like, he's never sinned against Peter. He might not have done something that Peter wanted him to do, like take down Rome, but as far as like in a sinful way,
harmed him. He's never done anything wrong to him. He's been perfect in every single way, and I mean, Peter's whole life was wrapped up with this guy.
So yes, so Chris says his heart would have just been terribly broken. I agree. I think maybe shattered comes to my mind. He was shattered, just shattered.
I don't think
what
we
have
really
I done?
Necessarily know what that felt like.
And when it says he goes out and my Bible says he weeps bitterly. What does yours say?
Wept bitterly.
Wept bitterly. The Greek is literally he went and he sobbed out loud. This is a big, grown, burly fisherman. I got it under control. Don't worry about me, Jesus. I got this. This is this guy. He is wailing at the top of his lungs. That is how broken he is. And I want to make sure we don't miss this moment, because Peter is a very different man after this.
Yeah.
And then he'll be even a very different man after that. Like, that was Peter 1.0. Now we're going to get, after the resurrection, Peter 2.0 needs some updating. And then we'll get Peter 3.0, and that's where Jesus actually wanted him to be. Dottie says, would he have been arrested if he didn't deny Christ? That's a great question, Dottie. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to know. The people who were in the courtyard at this point are not going to be the decision makers. They're not going to be the ones who are actually, executing on anything or deciding who is going to be going where. But I think it's possible that there would have been fallout. There could have been sort of a mob situation where they tried to kill Peter. They could have tried to deliver him over to the other court. Mm-hmm. But I think most likely they would have just basically shuffled him out and just gotten him out of there.
Yeah, probably.
But Lauren says, I'm sure that's one of his fears. Yeah.
And legitimately so.
I think they could have probably, those people wouldn't have arrested him. They either would have killed him or shuffled him out of the courtyard. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Margie says John was known as a disciple and wasn't arrested.
Somebody said something right above that was pretty good. So I think it was Susie.
Yeah, she says, I'd love to know if that played a part in his denials. I think there's a lot of things going on in the denial. I think first and foremost is self-preservation, right? And he's trying to make sure that he, nothing horrible happens to him. And just by being so surprised by the first one, I think he just sort of went into automatic and just the first thing no, that's not me. Oh, okay, no, I was not prepared for somebody to recognize me. No, that's not me. But the thing is, when you lie one time, it gets easier and easier to lie and easier to maintain that lie. And I think that's what was happening. And as it went further along, he had more insight into what he was saying and could have course corrected, but didn't. What we do know is that Jesus said that Peter was going to be the rock and that he was going to be the one who would strengthen his brothers. And so he wouldn't have died because God had a plan for him. And so he was going to be taken through that plan. But we also know that God knew what decision he was going to make and accurately told that to him.
As we said before, you can't mess God up and you can't thwart his will. So had he not, he had to deny because Jesus said he would. So I guess I don't know. So then I go, well, I don't, because there's nothing to talk about.
He's got free will.
I don't know.
He made the decision entirely out of free will.
He did.
And also God knew what was going to happen.
He was responsible for it.
Yeah.
But boy, he is heartbroken. And again, back to the Judas issue, you don't see that type of response from Judas.
Right.
Now, we will talk about Judas. In fact, we need to do that pretty soon because there's another plot going on at the same time here and what Judas is up to, but we'll save that for a different night. But Judas never is shattered in his heart over his sin, I don't think. I think he's shattered over what transpired. He regrets it. He even has some remorse. But there's no godly repentance that happens with him.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate because honestly, had Judas repented, God would have forgiven him. You get that, right? That's pretty incredible. There is no sin too big for God to forgive. There aren't any.
It's incredible. Well, let's move on, and I think we need to talk a little bit high level about some stuff that's about to go on, because we're about to see Jesus in their kangaroo court.
Yes.
We talked last night about how Israel at this time had probably the best justice system ever instituted in all of history. I mean, it was really incredible. And what we're about to see is that everything that had been set up by God in order to protect people and to sow restoration and repentance and fulfillment of the law is just bastardized by the Sadducees, by Caiaphas. It's really devastating. So let's walk through a little bit about the Sanhedrin, what was going on here, and sort of the problems associated with it.
Yeah. Well, we use the term kangaroo court, and so I'm assuming most of you have heard that term before. But if that's something that you're not familiar with, it's kind of a colloquial way of just saying it's a court where none of the rules are followed. It's a complete
it's a farce
circus. And it means in the end, even that if it sticks, it doesn't mean anything because justice was never served, because everything is turned on its head. So kangaroo court is not a nice term to describe something going on.
It has no relation to actual kangaroos. They are wonderful.
We do love kangaroos. All right, so first of all, let me just give you a little bit of the chronology here.
Yeah.
Because you kind of have to put all this in your mind, because like I said, we've got all these different plots kind of happening at the same time so that they can get all mixed in together like a milkshake and you have no idea what you're doing. So first of all, Jesus is taken to Annas's house. Now, we've already talked about that. So off the courtyard, there's a spoke up in the upper room. That's the high priest that was deposed back in 15 AD, but he's still pulling all the levers. Yep, all the strings are being pulled by him. That was around, we think, around 1 a.m. Okay, so Jesus goes up there. This takes a while. Like, it goes by really fast in the Gospels. It was not fast. It was awful, and it was drawn out, and it was long. We're getting a little bit of it. So at Annas's house, Annas is trying desperately to get an indictment against Jesus, which, by the way, was illegal in and of itself, but we'll get to that in a moment, serious enough that Rome would issue the death penalty. He's got his work cut out for him because Jesus has done nothing wrong. So
yeah, and all the problems they have with him, Rome doesn't really care.
Oh yeah,
blasphemy, Rome's like, you do your own religious thing.
Yeah, they're like,
we don't really care.
Whatever.
He turned your tables in the temple. Sorry.
Yeah, they don't care about that. So in Annas's house around 1 a.m. with the chief priests and all the religious leaders there, they are trying to get Jesus to indict himself. He will not do it. He won't do it. And so it's a failure. So they take him from there, they march him across the courtyard to wherever Caiaphas's branch was, and they take him into Caiaphas's house. Also, the Sanhedrin marches across with him. They're there as well. We don't know exactly, again, what time all this happened, but we know that this would have broken up somewhere around that rooster crowing.
3 to 5 a.m.-ish.
Somewhere between 3 and 5 a.m. So he, from like 1 a.m. to like 3 to 5 a.m.
They're at Caiaphas's house.
Right. And then there are times when he's being just held, like in a cell, being beaten by the temple guards as well when he's not being questioned. So all that kind of works in there too. Not totally sure where all that goes. And this at Caiaphas's house is where they finally decide that they have enough, even though it's ridiculous, to pronounce a death sentence in Jewish law on Jesus for blasphemy. And blasphemy was something that was punishable by death in the Old Testament, the book of Leviticus. But in order for that to happen, the person had to actually claim the name of God. So if you didn't do that, then you couldn't blaspheme. Then they march him across, remember, across that courtyard again. Maybe this is where Peter sees him. So between Annas's house and Caiaphas's house, Peter is down there denying him. Jesus walks across. Now he's going over to the Great Hall. This is over on the Temple Mount.
This is the Supreme Court.
Exactly. This is just now around daylight somewhere. So they knew that everything that they had done so far, and I'm going to go through a list, it's going to blow your mind in a minute, all the laws that they had and all the ones that they broke. But one of their laws was you can't have a trial at night.
Yeah.
You can't. So
for obvious reasons.
well, yeah, I mean, who does that? It's like there's nothing good happens after dark. So they had just had the whole trial all during the night. So in order, get this, after they'd broken that and then like 20 other laws, they march him across to the Supreme Court, their great hall, so that they could have a proper kangaroo court in the daylight in case anybody noticed that they had done it at night. They could say, oh, no, we did it during the day. It was after daybreak. The stuff that they swallow, like they're swallowing camels and straining out gnats. Do you know what I mean? It's so bizarre. And yet it's such human nature.
Yeah.
Like the stuff that we'll do and accept, and then the stuff, oh, no, I can't do that.
We'll kill God himself, but we shouldn't hold a trial at night. You've literally just broken every single one of your other laws. That's the one you're going to choose. Okay, that's fine.
Exactly.
Go with that.
So they ask him this, and we're going to read this. They ask him the same questions. They keep asking him the same questions over and over again. They finally get what they want. They pronounce death on him. I mean, they've already done this. It's just a sham again. Then they take him over to Pilate, to the Praetorium. We'll cover this, but when they get him there, now Pilate was the Roman governor that was in charge. If you remember, quite some time ago, I told you that the Herod that was in charge of that particular area, because remember there were different Herods, it's like a name of a king, like king or Caesar, whatever. It's not a name, it's just a title. There were different Herods in charge of different portions. And Herod Archelaus had so ticked off the Jews that Caesar said, you're done. You're done. We're not doing this anymore. You're out. And he put a Roman governor in his place. And so Pilate was the chosen one to rule this Judea, Samaria area, which is why he's there. Now, he doesn't live in Jerusalem. He's there for the Passover because Passover can get sticky and false messiahs might pop up. Insurrections could happen. Rome does not like insurrections.
Gotta be prepared for it. Keep the peace.
Pilate is there. Herod is there in town. They got their armies in town. Everybody's there to make sure everything stays nice and calm. And again, in the providence of God, they needed the Roman governor to be there to pronounce the execution. If he had been way far away in Tiberias, Jesus would not have died on the right day.
Yeah.
Would have taken too long. It's absolutely amazing. So he goes to Pilate for, I call phase one. Pilate says, I don't find anything wrong in this guy. I don't have anything. Like this is ridiculous. But then, oh, wait, he says, you're a Galilean? Oh, guess what? Herod's here. He rules that area. I'm sending you across the aqueduct or whatever, the viaduct. I'm sending you to Herod. So he sends him over to Herod. Herod does his questioning. Jesus will not speak to him at all. And it really ticks Herod off because he wants to see some show, a magic show, a miracle. So he says, he throws up his hands. He sends him back to Pilate for Pilate phase 2. And Pilate again says, there's nothing here. But for reasons we'll discuss later, he goes ahead and gives them what they want and he orders his execution. So that's kind of the overarching chronology. So just to recap it super fast, it's to Annas's house. Annas doesn't get the job done. He sends him over to Caiaphas's house. Caiaphas is able to sort of get the job done as far as he pronounces a judgment on him because he thinks he blasphemed. They send him across the viaduct over to the Great Hall, the Supreme Court. They have the sham trial again in the daylight to justify the fact that they've condemned this innocent man, but not at night. Then they take him over to Pilate for phase 1. Pilate sends him to Herod. Herod sends him back to Pilate. And then Pilate executes Jesus. And that's how all of that goes. So if you can kind of hold that, and I know it's a lot, but if you can kind of hold that in your head, then as we're working through the text, I think it will kind of come together a little bit easier for you and it won't be quite so confusing, like all these just moving parts and where are we and what's going on and what's next. So it won't be so confusing. So let's do the jurisprudence thing.
This is one of my favorite parts I think it's particularly relevant right now, just watching stuff going on in the United States and being like, you know, if you have a system that's very much set on how God intended things to be in terms of a justice system, how does that play out? And so what we're going to talk about right now is how a justice system, how jurisprudence was set up in Israel at this time. The rights and the privileges that Jesus should have been afforded, how a trial should have gone down, and then we can talk about how it didn't. But the first thing to know and be aware of is that everything in their system is predicated on the fact that all people are made in the image of God. And so everyone has inherent value. And so their whole thing is about, they want to make sure that they never wrongly convict, that there are no false positives, that everyone is treated very, very fairly.
That there's every opportunity to be proven innocent.
Yeah.
If you are.
Yeah. And
every opportunity.
And that's just because, again, we believe that men and women are made in the likeness and the image of God. And so there's a divine spark there. And you cannot just...
And by the way, when she says divine spark, she doesn't mean like you've got the spark of divinity that you'll someday grow into a God yourself. She's not saying that. And I say that because there are some religions that teach
that is correct.
That is.
No, that this life that we have is given to us by God, and that it is innately and inherently valuable. So everything we're going to talk about and everything in their justice system is predicated on that.
Yes, life is definitely sacred. And by the way, as we're going through this, I just want to say this. There is a lot of this still in play, embedded in the culture today in Israel.
Yeah.
I remember in 2006 when I was visiting Israel, like the trip of my life, I would go back in a heartbeat if I possibly could, and hope to someday. Hope to take you. She was a tiny little kid. She didn't get to go. But I would see police cars roaming, you know, like normal, like around. They always had their lights flashing. You know how when they'll turn it on when they want you to pull over? Well, over there, they never turn them off. They're always on. And I finally asked somebody about it, and I just said, how come all the police cars are always flashing their lights constantly? Like, how do you know when to pull over? Why do they do that? And they said, oh, because we don't believe in entrapment. And we believe if we're there, you should know we're there. And that way, that gives you the opportunity not to commit the crime. And he said, the guy I was talking to, he said, it's a brilliant system. Do you know how much crime never happens because they realize there's a police car somewhere in the vicinity? He goes, it cuts it down like you would not believe. They're brilliant people. It's a wonderful
way of doing it.
I've been bitter ever since. Every time I see a cop like hiding, I'm like, oh, in Israel, you wouldn't be able to do that. I mean, like pulled off the road, you know, ready to nab you for speeding.
Their thought process is, we want to give you an opportunity to do what is right. Yes. Instead of waiting to trap you and catch you doing something wrong.
Right, exactly.
It's really brilliant.
I just had to tell you that little story because I think it's so interesting. So even in their punishments, it was never to be mutilating. It was never like a crucifixion would be, that is just the most devastating, horrific death they could possibly think of. Even in their death, they tried to make it very quick and definite and done, and not like go on for days like crucifixion.
Crucifixion, you could die over the course of many, many days. It was
Jesus
awful.
did not, because he died when he wanted to.
And punishments often were focused more on restoration and making things whole than they were on sort of being punitive in nature.
So I'm about ready to just read you this big list, and what I don't want you to do is be like, oh, I'm trying to write all this down, because you'll just be overwhelmed. So do this, like, get your drink, you got your tea or whatever you're drinking, sit back in your chair, relax, and try to just get a broad sense rather than like all the little teeny tiny details. Because if you can
get into the thought process of what they're doing here,
get the broad sense, then as we're going through the trial, things will start to come back to you like, oh, they missed that. Oh my word, they missed that. Oh, they missed that. They missed that. So here they are. Do you want to do that?
Yeah. So first one, if found guilty, the judge postponed sentencing for 3 days, during which time the jurors could do nothing but attend to the case, and they fasted during this time. Why is that interesting?
Well, this was a period of time, if the person was, and this is guilty of a capital offense.
Yes.
I didn't add that to my notes. Guilty of a capital offense, they had to take 3 days. They couldn't quickly kill the person. And during those 3 days, they couldn't do anything but focus on the case. They couldn't eat or anything because it was such a huge deal to take a person's life. They had to be sure. They had to give time for possibly more witnesses to come forward. And if a witness did come forward, they had to be there for it and they had to listen to that person. So it was a safeguard against executing a person who was not guilty.
And in that same vein, if a criminal received the death penalty, the court had to wait a full day to exact the punishment, to give time for further evidence to come forward. Again, they don't want to be hasty in the decision of taking somebody's life. Yeah. A defendant could not incriminate himself if he confessed. So if he says, yes, I'm guilty, it had to be corroborated by 2 to 3 witnesses.
Isn't that something?
You cannot incriminate yourself in the system. It's not even an I plead the fifth. It's literally, we will not let you do that. You can plead guilty. We're going to have at least 2 or 3 other people who have to corroborate your guilty claim.
Remember that one for this trial.
Very, very important. If it was a unanimous guilty decision
by the court,
if all the jurors, if the whole court says guilty unanimously, the case was thrown out.
Not something.
If everybody says he's guilty, the case was thrown out for prejudice against the accused, and because it lacked any mercy, and it might be the result of plotting against someone.
So they have a unanimous decision.
It's out. You walk.
Amazing.
Really fascinating. Yeah, and if a witness came forth that challenged the decision, it had to be given time for a hearing. Yep. Regardless, trials could never be held at nighttime. We've already talked about this. Always daytime. Never started late in the day either. Had to give a full day, give reasonable time. Yep. The property of the accused could never be confiscated. It had to always be given to his family.
And again, this is if somebody was going to be executed, most likely.
Correct. Capital punishment.
Have it anymore.
No Jewish judge or member of the Sanhedrin could be involved in the arresting of the suspect. Haha, interesting.
Did you catch that?
Again, it prejudices them, right? It really biases their decision making.
You can't do the arrest and be the judge and jury. You can't do all of it. It's completely prejudiced at that point. Do you remember in the garden who was there?
Everyone.
Huh. Interesting.
Just a thought. No trial was to be held in secret.
Always
just
public.
A thought. The first procedure of any legal proceeding is the presentation of the defense. The accusation comes after the defense. Did you get that? So if there's biasing going on in this, they want to bias towards innocence always. And so the first thing that happens is the person gets to present their defense before you even know what the accusation is. Really smart. Testimony of 2 witnesses must be absolutely 100% consistent. Matthew 26:61 indicates that the testimony against Jesus was inconsistent. Here's what's incredible about the 2 witnesses. They also had to be kept separate from each other so that they couldn't collude, they couldn't talk to each other. So the 2 witnesses had to not be in the same family because they could talk to each other. They had to be kept apart from each other the entire time. If there was any thought that the 2 had colluded, if the testimonies were too close to the same, it gets thrown out.
Yep.
So the testimonies have to be consistent, but they cannot be identical. And that's really, really smart. Lauren says, sounds like our court system could take a cue from that. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea, Lauren.
Sure,
I think we should do that. Jewish authorities were not permitted to tear their garments and create a heightened emotional environment that would unnecessarily provoke those participating in the judicial proceedings. It had to be a very calm, very rational affair. They could not get all worked up. They couldn't get, everybody being real emotional.
And if you're like, what? We don't tear our clothes usually, not on purpose anyway, so it's kind of weird. But that was a show of just utter grief,
dismay.
And, they would just
they're putting on this big dramatic performance.
They would tear their clothes, but the high priests were not permitted to do that.
Don't get to do it.
It was too insightful.
This is really interesting. The accusation of blasphemy is only valid when the accused actually speaks the name of God. Just keep that in mind as we continue this. The sentence could only be announced 3 days after a verdict of guilty. This follows from what we said, that they had to wait. They had to wait as jurors 3 days after that. They can't just immediately sentence. So the verdict comes in guilty. They have to wait 3 days to sentence. Really great idea. Judges were to remain humane and kind through the proceedings. A person condemned to death could not be beaten or scourged beforehand. Let me say that another way. You cannot inflict any physical harm on the person prior to their death.
That's right.
You can't beat them, you can't whip them, you can't do anything to them. The death is the punishment. That's where they go.
Exactly.
If it's a capital offense, you cannot beat them ahead of that.
And that goes back to the image of God thing. Like, how much torture can a person really take? So if they deserve to die, then they would die.
Yeah.
But they're not going to get, beaten to death and then killed.
Yeah.
On top of it.
The judges could not bring any charges.
That would be the Sanhedrin, my friends.
The Sanhedrin cannot bring the charge. Okay? All right. No arrest could be affected by a bribe of any kind. Helpful info. No trials could be held during festivals, on the Sabbath, or on the eve of the Sabbath. Tell me, what festival are we in at the moment?
We're in the Passover, the biggest one of the year.
And what day is it?
And it is the eve of the Sabbath. It's a Friday. That would be Sabbath Eve.
So, just again, as a thought, all of these, every single one of those that I just named off, were all broken within hours.
Multiple times.
Yeah, many of them were broken over and over again. This is beyond horrific. We just set up to you what is, I think, objectively one of the best justice systems, and really honoring to God and honoring to all the people involved. Judy says Jesus didn't get the benefit of any of these rules.
Not a single one.
No.
And had he, they wouldn't have been able to crucify him because he wasn't guilty of anything. So this is what the system was designed to protect. And the very one, did they break every rule? Mary says, I think they did.
Yeah.
I think they broke every single rule that they had. And by the way, there are probably more that we've missed. In fact, I know that there are. Kim says, are there any that they kept? I don't think that there are. I know that there was another one I didn't even write down where the witness that was like the witness,
the complaining witness
that put the guy away, had to be the first one to throw the stone when they stoned them, because that's how they would do capital. We're going back to the Old Testament here before Rome said no. They had to be the first one to cast the stone. And that's why women were not allowed to testify, because they didn't think that they were strong enough. Also, when they would give the verdict, a guilty verdict or an innocent verdict, it was never a mob like, everyone at one. They had to go roll call, and it started at the youngest, and it went all the way up one by one. They had to iterate yes, he's guilty, or no, he's innocent. And they wouldn't start with the oldest because they were afraid that would prejudice some of the younger ones that weren't as strong emotionally, that they might be affected by that. So they would start with the youngest. What is your verdict? And they would say guilty, or they would say innocent. And then they would go to the next one. What is yours? And they would have to say it out loud, every single, all the way up to 71. If they had that many there, they had to have at least 23 up to 71. And you'll notice too, like we just said, that was just glaringly absent, wasn't it? Along with all of these. So yeah, these guys, they really outdid themselves. But then when it's time to go to Herod, we'll do this tomorrow night, but I just have to say it because we're kind of on the topic. After this, after they've broken 20 plus rules multiple times, so we're in the hundreds now of broken rules. They won't go into Herod's his palace, because he's a Gentile, and that's where we draw the line. That would defile them, and they wouldn't be able to eat the Passover. So can't go into Herod's. No, that would defile them. And this just shows. I mean, it's so sad. Like, you're so defiled on the inside. Yeah. How can you possibly even be thinking that not stepping foot in a Gentile's house, which is your rule, by the way, not God's.
Yeah, exact. Excellent point.
Because Jesus is in there and he's not defiled. We're gonna have a lot of emotions in the next, like this week. It's gonna take you from furiously angry to just heart-wrenching sad to grateful. There's a lot in here, and some of the emotions are hard to have, but
Yeah.
I don't want us to shy away from those, because I think that's why those things are written down for us, so we know that when Jesus paid that price for our sin, it cost him
Everything.
When he suffered in ways we'll never be able to comprehend. We couldn't do it. We don't have the capacity to do what he did and to suffer. I mean, we're not perfect either, but I mean, just like taking the suffering on ourselves, we would die before we ever even got close to what he endured. And we always like to end by just kind of talking about that, by saying maybe you've been listening for a while, or maybe it's your first time, maybe it's live, maybe it's later, and you're going, I've always kind of known some of this stuff, but I didn't understand it, and I want that. I want his forgiveness. Like, he went to the trouble to suffer and die for me. How could I reject that? How could I say no thank you to that when I'm Peter, you know? I'm the one who's denied him my whole life. I'm the one who's let him down. And we can all say that, by the way. I'm not saying you're Peter and I'm not. I've done terrible things that I need forgiveness for. And his forgiveness is so amazing. It covers all of it. And all you have to do is cry out to him and ask him to forgive you and ask him to save you from your sins. So I'm going to say a quick word of prayer with you tonight. And I just want you to know, only pray this along with me if it really reflects what is in your heart. If you're trying to come up with a formula that is like the ticket into heaven, then don't do this, because it's not a formula and it's not a rote prayer. It has everything to do with what's in your heart. And then we're just going to put some flesh on those bones by putting some words to it, so that you can always know that June 2nd, 2020 was the day that you said, I'm going to do that. I want Jesus in my life. So let's go to prayer. If you want to pray along with me, you can just say something like this. Dear Lord Jesus, as I reflect on your suffering and your death and your shed blood to forgive me of my sins, I am just so aware of what an incredibly bad sinner I am, Lord. I know that I need salvation, and I know that I can't possibly earn that, Lord. I can't possibly be good enough. I'll never be able to get to God in any other way but to know, Jesus, that you paid the price I could never pay. You took the wrath of God on yourself on that cross, the wrath that I won't have to face in eternity, because you're applying it to my life. Thank you for doing that for me. Lord Jesus, I just reach out right now in faith, and I accept that free gift that you're handing to me. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart, because I know I don't deserve it. And Jesus, whatever you want to do with me from now on, I just want you to know that as your disciple, my whole life now will be spent just trying to serve you. So however that looks, I'm in, and it's not because I'm trying to earn my way to you, because you've already covered all of that. It's because I'm grateful and I love you and I thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Well, thanks for being with us tonight. These episodes feel very timely.
They do. Isn't that something, how God has a way of doing that?
Yeah. And I think it's also interesting to just watch Jesus be the recipient of complete injustice and see a lot of injustice in the world and go, wow, okay, so God really understands what that feels like. And I hope that you guys can take solace in that.
And we can see who the power behind the injustice always is.
It is always Satan. Yeah.
That's who he is.
And he is operating this entire trial of Jesus, by the way, like 100% manipulating, in charge, trying to make this happen. So I just think that's an interesting thing to keep in mind right now. And I know these are hard days and hard times. COVID's already been hard, and now we get to just see sort of firsthand the injustice in the world, in our own economic systems and our judicial systems. It's really hard, but Jesus took it first. And so
and he's
he
still
will-
sovereign, and
Yeah.
he's still on the throne, and nothing surprises him, and there's no plan B. So
Woo!
somehow,
We're gonna be
some
okay.
way, he's going to use this. Look for opportunities to let him use you during this time. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know, but he's an amazing God,
Yes.
and he can bring
He's still in charge.
wonderful things out of the most treacherous, horrible things, and that has to really frustrate Satan, which I love.
Yeah.
Feels good.
Go be frustrated. I love that. All right. Well, we love you guys. Go make good decisions. We'll see you tomorrow night. Same place, same time. Good night.